What is a bad arm, a good arm, and how can they help or hurt me? My name's Evan Kaufman, your VA loan originator, here to help explain adjustable rate mortgages, otherwise referred to as ARMs. First, we're going to look at old ARMs versus new ARMs, and we're going to talk about that comparison between ARM and a typical fixed mortgage, and then we'll discuss pros, cons, how that can affect you, and how you want to evaluate if you're even going to consider looking at an adjustable rate mortgage. So let's look at old ARMs versus new ARMs and them versus fixed mortgages. So up front, most people currently and in the recent past have done fixed rate mortgages. That means you might have heard 30-year fix. That's the most common, then followed by a 15-year fixed mortgage. And that's where, all right, my interest rate is X and I'm going to have that for the full 30-year term. No matter what, it's not going to adjust. Awesome. Fixed mortgage, pretty simple. Most common type that's done still today. ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages, are just that. The rate is adjustable. Flip the words around. It's an adjustable rate mortgage. Now, your old ARMs, they're not weak or anything like that, but the old ARMs, pre-2008-9 that we're talking, were very dangerous things. And those are things that, even myself, very cautious of. I still hear the term ARM and you're like triggered going, oh no, that could be a problem. What's the issue that caused the crash? It was a contributor to the crash, so to say. Oh my gosh, why are we even talking about these ones now? Well, your old ARMs could be very deadly. That's where folks were getting an interest rate at X, and then all of a sudden, 1, 2, or 3 years later, it could move by a lot. There were very limited restrictions on ARMs pre-2008-9. 2008-9 blows up. We put a lot of restrictions and regulations in on conventional mortgages, or created conventional mortgages really, and we put a lot of restrictions around adjustable rate mortgages. So today there's a lot of safety nets. So the old ARMs, more unregulated, more Wild West, be very deadly. The new ARMs can be positive, they're more regulated, but we still need to analyze and look at them carefully. So with new ARMs, we're going to talk about how you can evaluate them here first up front, and then we'll discuss how ultimately you could benefit or not benefit from them in the analysis you got to do. So new ARMs, what we put in place are a few numbers. There's really 4 main numbers that you got to think about with an ARM. A big one that we're working with right now, for example, are 5-1 ARMs. You might hear the shorthand 5-1, when really the full term of the ones that I usually work with right now are 5-1-1-5. There's also 7-1s, 6-1s, there's a lot of different numbers for it. But the order of the numbers are all the same. So 5-1-1-5, or referred to as just a 5-1 ARM, means this. The first number, that 5, means that is the term that your loan will be fixed at the start. So if it's a 5-1, that means, hey, the first 5 years, your rate's actually going to be fixed, just like your 30-year fixed mortgage. So your rate will be fixed for the time frame of that first number, 5 years. The second number, the next 1, means how many times that rate can adjust per year in the future. So if all of a sudden, let's say it's a 5-1, that means, hey, your rate is fixed for 5 years, then once per year after that, it can adjust 1 time per year. Then the third number is the maximum that rate can go up or down by in that subsequent adjustable year. So 5 years it's fixed, it can adjust every year 1 time after that, and it can't adjust by more than, like the ones we deal with is a 5-1-1-5, more than 1% per year. So that means, let's say my rate that I got on that first fixed 5, for the heck of it, is 5.5%. And then all of a sudden, at the end of those 5 years, rates have gone up. Well, if they've gone up by 3 percentage points, well, the most it can go up by is only 1%. So I'd go from 5.5 to 6.5, not to 8.5 or whatever rates would be if they were a lot higher. Same with lower, though, too. If rates went down to 4%, then you wouldn't go down to 4, you go down to 4.5 from 5.5. 1% is the most it can move. The last number, so in this scenario, 5-1-1-5, that last 5 means that's the maximum amount that the overall rate can move on the mortgage. So if rates just skyrocket over the next 10 years, it'd have to be 10 years, because remember, every year it can only move once and no more than 1%. If rates skyrocket, let's say to 15%, and you were at 5.5%, the most your rate could go up by would be 5%. So you would cap at 10.5%, whereas everyone else would be at that higher rate, whatever that would be at that time. Same with lower, though, too. It can go down, but no more than that 5%. And sometimes there's even a minimum on there because you can't go below 0, for example, on your rate. But you do get the downside benefit as well. So that's how the new mortgages work out. That's a pretty positive restriction and expectation on ARMs that wasn't always there before. So today, how do we evaluate that's worthwhile for us to use or not? Well, here's the main thing. Over the last 15 years, it's been rare to even see ARMs make sense. Why is that? Because we've had what's called an inverted yield curve a lot of the time. That means that short-term interest rates actually cost more than long-term interest rates, which is really weird. If you happen to be a treasury bond nut, I was an economics degree, so I love some of this stuff. Oddly, the 10-year treasury or a longer-term treasury note, which is what lenders use to hedge their mortgages bets, were paying back a lower percentage than shorter term, when historically short term rates pay back less than long term ones, which means that you should get a better interest rate, a lower interest rate effectively on short term debt than long term debt, but not the case. It's been inverted. So recently, ARMs in a lot of cases have actually cost more than 30-year fixed, just giving more of a reason to do a 30-year fixed. So over the last 10, 15 years, it's really been all fixed mortgages because one, the rates have just been so low from a historical perspective. You can get a rate 3-4%. Why even do an ARM, even if it could be a hair better, because you're locking that puppy in for 30 years or so. Awesome. That's one reason. But number two is, heck, the ARM rates have been even higher than the 30-year fix in a lot of cases because of that inverted yield curve. Well, now two things have happened. One, rates have gone up. So rates aren't at those historical lows. Now we're kind of in the middle from historical lows and highs. Theoretically, we're actually at higher rates over the last 15 years than lower rates. So now rates are higher. And on top of that, the inverted yield curve has started to normalize a bit. So ARM rates have gotten a little more competitive. So what we're sometimes seeing are ARM rates being anywhere from 0.5% or more better than your fixed rates. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, if my rate could be 0.5% lower, maybe I want to look at those ARMs again. But I remember they're bad, they're terrible, they cause the world to go into panic. Yes, that they help cause that, no doubt about it. But they're a little bit different today. So let's look at them and say, when could it make sense for me? So going back to the very common ones that we deal with, 5115, the 5-1 ARMs. The basic statement that I always like to talk about when evaluating, hey, does this ARM make sense for me? We need to, one, ask yourself the main question up front. Am I going to keep this home for the next 5 years or more? So like in this example, or I should say more than that first term number. So in the example we're using, it's 5 years. If it's a 3-1 ARM, well, then you gotta ask yourself 3 years, 6-1, 6 years. The basics there are, hey, am I planning to sell or refinance this home within that period that I am fixed? If so, we really might want to consider looking at an ARM. Why is that? Well, if I got the rate fixed for 5 years, but I'm, let's say, in the military, and I know I'm going to be leaving this home and I don't want to be a landlord, and I'm selling it in 4 or 5 years, and I'm not going to keep this, well, hey, I might want to consider just fixing it for 5 years because I know I'm already going to sell it and I'm going to get a better rate, so long as it is actually better, over this time frame and capitalize on that. Might be worthwhile to consider it then. So you want to ask yourself, am I going to sell or refinance this home within that period? Or another way to look at it is, am I going to keep this home longer than that period without refinancing it? So that's one big thing up front. If you are within that window, though, that you might sell or refinance within the window of that first number, then you really might want to look at doing the ARM ultimately. The other thing you want to ask yourself is, where do I see rates today? Do I see them going up or do I see them going down? If we're in a super low rate environment, then ARMs become less attractive. Why? Because remember, ARMs go both ways. We're used to just them going up because that's all the horror stories we've heard, and those were very true, no doubt about it. But today, now all of a sudden, with rates being more elevated, there's a chance it could be lower than, they could go lower in the future than just higher. And it's almost like you have a somewhat built-in free refinance option if rates happen to get better. So that's one thing you want to ask yourself, hey, where do I see rates going in the future? Like personally, I see right now, hey, rates are more elevated than were in the past. I personally believe they're still a little bit better than what they are over historical averages, so it makes ARMs maybe a hair less attractive. However, in the short recent history, the last 15 years, rates are a lot higher than what they've been. So if we have some economic trouble, we could see rates going back down, and that ARM is almost like a free refinance option within it. So maybe I do want to consider them, right? You just got to evaluate that risk. And the last thing you got to ask yourself is, what's your tolerance for it? I would say risk tolerance, which is still probably pretty accurate to it. But with these ARMs now today, especially if rates are higher, making ARMs potentially more attractive, and your time frame of owning or refinancing the home is shorter, then it almost makes these ARMs a little more of a gamble than a risk. And what I mean by that is, a gamble means it could pay off well, or it could go bad or break even. A risk usually means, hey, it's going to kind of stay the same, or it's going to get worse. That's usually what we just kind of think, or at least I think. Are you willing to roll the dice or not? You got to ask yourself, how much are you willing to roll that dice? Could it go up or down ultimately in the long run? That's the other part you got to ask yourself as well. Then the fourth final thing would really be, what is that rate difference? If we have an inverted yield curve and the rate is higher than on a fixed, then don't do the ARM. But if all of a sudden that rate is, I kind of look at it around that 0.5% mark, so roughly a 0.5% better in interest rate. Even I might consider sometimes at 0.25% if you're really certain on that sale or refinance within the period of that first number, say 5 years, then you might still want to consider it. But you want to know what that spread is. If that spread is big enough, hey, that makes it more willing to do that ARM. So recapping on the basics of those, you want to make sure that you evaluate that term of, do you plan on selling or financing the home within that first number? You want to ask yourself ultimately then as well, hey, do I take the risk tolerance well with this or not? Am I okay rolling the dice for this? Is there an inverted yield curve that's making this pricing better or worse? Those are many of the things that you want to take into consideration when debating on should you do an ARM versus a fixed mortgage. My name's Evan Kaufman. Hope this helped you with some analysis. We'll talk to you later. Take care.